Hello, welcome everyone to this not too early morning, but morning session, which is feature length for all platforms, part of the sort of Meet the Commissioner, well, Commissioner Question Time strand. There's been a bit of a tweak this year. I'm Paul, I work at Creative England. Creative England is a fairly new sort of company to documentaries, but we have been involved with projects such as Notes on Blindness, Orion, The Lovers and the Despots. And we've got a fantastic lineup of guests for you today. And we have a sort of an order of how we're going to go about things. So what I'm going to do is actually just ask all of you to introduce yourselves, just explain your role very briefly, and then I'll hit you with a first question, if that's okay. Yes,
Me go first? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm Al Brown. I'm head of film and television for Viceland, the TV channel, as well as Vice Films and kind of other elements of the Vice global empire. And that mostly means that I look after sort of feature documentaries, scripted features, as well as episodic for TV. And we're producers as well as commissioners, so sometimes we're a little bit confusing, I think.
Great, thank you.
I'm Hajnal Molnar, and I manage the Sundance Documentary Film Fund. My job is to cultivate artists and look for projects to support. We have about $1 to $2 million a year that we grant out to projects at various stages of development through production. And in addition to granting, we do artist support, creative support, labs and such things.
Cool. My name is John Van Wyck. I'm with Cinereach, which is a New York City-based film foundation and production company. We fund both feature-length fiction and nonfiction films. Some of our films here at the festival include Quest, Strong Island, The Cage Fighter, Dina, and some others. And in the past, we've supported films like Citizen 4, I'm Not Your Negro, Cutie and the Boxer, Best of Enemies, and so forth.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jutta Krug from Cologne, Germany, working at WDR, Westdeutscher Rundfunk, public broadcaster, journalist channel, and within the culture department, we have also feature-length documentaries. I guess I'm casted here like some sort of a dinosaur because I represent the linear broadcaster. In fact, we still are pretty classical in what we are doing. I have the privilege to only focus on feature-length creative documentaries, doing all kind of fun productions with all kind of different partners in Germany and abroad, France, Britain, US, whatever. So, we broadcast within, this is actually a regional channel, WDR, but we are part of the first national channel, ARD, so we broadcast on both levels, and regional isn't regional anymore anyway, so we try to be present at many festivals, international, be it Cannes, Berlinale, Sheffield, or whatever. Leipzig, of course, also, and fun being here. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you very much. And just to throw you straight back then into this kind of the main kind of leading question of the whole panel, which is, from your point of view, if you had to kind of nail something to the door that says what for you constitutes a feature doc, what would that be? And can I go straight back to you?
Well, of course, everybody would say feature is feature, meaning 90 minutes or over, but it's not only the length, it's, of course, a very specific approach to very subjective, unique handwriting as a filmmaker. For me personally, I should say, it should be or could be entertaining, it could be teaching, educational, and it could also be heartwarming. And it's the best if all three criteria come together. That's for me what is really the core of the whole thing. Once you hit all the three aspects, then top.
Magic.
Magic, then magic happens, exactly.
Okay. Thank you, John.
So Cinereach is really expansive in what can be considered a feature-length doc. I mean, for us, the eligibility criteria is 60 minutes or more and some ambition of being exhibited theatrically. But beyond that, you know, I think we want filmmakers to be able to define for themselves how they describe their work. And if we can find a way to support it, if it feels relevant to our mission and we can justify support, we're not going to allow the definition of feature length or not feature length sort of get in the way. We recently supported a VR project because we could make a case that it was sort of advancing our mission. But I think specific to Cinereach, the type of feature length doc that we're looking for has some extent of personal authorship. There's a personal vision that's being driven by an individual who is exploring some topic that is, you know, I think we could justify it or explain it as socially beneficial, culturally beneficial in some way, and that it's being executed in a way that's artful and advances the art form. So a vital story, artfully told, is what we call it.
I would sign this also.
It's what?
I'd sign it also.
Yeah.
Your definition.
I think for us, we're also pretty flexible what we mean by a feature doc. Generally for us, 52 plus minutes, 50 plus minutes, we're very flexible actually. More importantly, what we're looking for is like a strong directorial voice. We're looking for something that plays in metaphor, ambiguity, you know, something that has multiple levels and meanings. And we want, you know, the storyteller to be telling a story that has something that's important for them, important for society and culture as well, and advances, you know, the cultural kind of tapestry that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've all, you pretty much all covered it. I guess, yeah, especially on kind of runtime. I think we'll probably talk a bit about that anyway. But like, yeah, it's, you know, obviously it moves around so much. What kind of, how long, you know, and I think actually having a film and saying like it has to be a specific length is sometimes dangerous. But I guess that, like, one of the ways that I kind of always think about it is just like, I always try and picture myself as the audience, and I think, like, would I be happy if I spent £10 and sat in a cinema and watched this? Like, and that film may never, you know, the projects that we work with may never have a theatrical release, or they may not, but I always try and sort of judge it as, like, if it was like the kind of shared experience of like sitting in a room with lots of other people, spending money on a ticket, going somewhere, sitting down and watching this film, would I feel like, yes, I'm really glad I did that? And that's, so I guess there is still an element of like, I think about it with you know, big screen and cinema in mind, you know, even if that's not always going to be the destination. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, I think the, you know, talking about what the form of a feature doc is something we're going to move on to, but I think we'd like to just show a clip first, which is from a project called My Escape. If I could put this first question to you just to start off, which is just about kind of the form and the style of documentary work. And, you know, do you feel there's something that really kind of defines for you a feature for you know, for a kind of, as you were describing, that collective theatrical experience, or that and what we might see in the comfort of our own home on small screen? Is there something about kind of the form and style of a feature doc that you feel is different from what you might do with a serialized documentary?
Well, this project was very specific. Usually we do observational pieces or investigative pieces or personal quest or whatever, and in this case we were facing 1 million refugees that came to Germany. We had this awareness of people, what can we do, how can we help? We had the welcome culture, and people were really, it was the very essential topic at the moment last year, and it still is. So what can we do? We have to create some sort, we want people to understand, where do these people come from? What did they live through while they were on their escape to Germany or wherever safe ground they could find? And the concept was easy. We noticed they didn't have luggage, they had a plastic bag, but nearly everybody had a smartphone. And they were filming very often their own trip. So we actually found a lot of footage on the web, and we went to shelters. We asked people, what do you have on your phone? And we wanted to act quickly, because we knew these pictures will be vanished, and then they filmed something else, like the German course or something. And we actually managed, we were not sure that it could work, but we managed to assemble a lot of material, and so it's user-generated material, and we only filmed interviews to have people tell their own story. And why did we work with the user-generated material? We thought it's the most powerful. It's so authentic. You could be closer to these situations. You feel like you're sitting in the rubber boat with them. And this powerful impact you could not possibly achieve with anything else. So that's the result. It's still on the web. You can check it out.
So for you, this was a really unusual approach to kind of, as it were, commissioning and.
It's not every topic that is suitable for user-generated content. You know, in this case, it was the perfect form. So you always have to ask what is appropriate to what you want to tell. And the filmmaker, in this case, she stepped totally back. She said, let's get this footage. And she only arranged it, and she created like a narrative arc, and where there were no pictures from this person, someone else had just waiting for the rubber boat and paying the person that brings you over, and the fear. So it was like a huge collective chorus that via the footage and the different perspective, different countries of origin, and it all made up a huge collage of what they went through. And in fact, it was so powerful that I personally think it created a lot of empathy for the viewers to really feel and understand what these people that arrive here traumatized have lived through.
And can I ask for the rest of you, just in terms of how you approach the form and style, just in terms of the kind of material that you acquire or that you commission, is it something that you think very consciously about when you're making those decisions? Do you feel that there's a sort of an approach for you or your organisation, or is it?
I mean, I think, you think about form with every film you make, right? But I guess one of the things that I'm sort of always a bit cautious of is thinking about form too early, if you know what I mean. I think that it's quite important to kind of understand the story that you're trying to tell and the access that you have, and then kind of bring the sort of best, most suitable tools to that approach. And I've definitely, I've sort of made mistakes in the past and got trapped in things where I've tried to take a bit of access or a story and turn that into a type of film that it just didn't support. And so I think I'm a lot more careful about kind of trying to find the best approach for any story or access. But I think it's up to everyone here to be trying as much new stuff as possible and thinking about the form of documentary. I think I think audiences want to see different ways of telling stories as much as possible. And obviously there's hundreds of ways of doing that.
Yeah, I think for us too, form comes after you have kind of the story. And one of the great things with Sundance is that we do have our labs. So once you get a grant from us, you're eligible for the labs, and that's where we can really kind of work with you on the story and kind of craft it. So the form fits the story that you're trying to tell. And then just, traditionally docs have been, they have more ambiguity, they can be edited, slower editing, pace-wise, but with Netflix and Hulu and all these platforms, the expectations of what audiences want have changed. So I think there's the idea of form and I guess just form has to fit the story and the voice of the storyteller, and expectations of audiences have increased, so there has to be a fit, because otherwise audiences will not be happy. And they know, I think.
Yeah, from our standpoint, I think for us it's important that the filmmaker be able to feel that she or he is making the work that they want to make, and that we understand that. And if what their objective is to make something that's emotionally resonant and accessible, then form should probably be in service of that mission. But if the artist is setting out to create art and form is the point, or a big part of the point, we also want to create a form of support and a conversation around that project and that filmmaker that honors that, and that allows them to experiment with the very real risk of it not landing. We want to be responsible about that, but filmmakers out there taking risks at the expense of maybe accessibility or emotional resonance are people pushing the boundaries of the form. Kitty Green would be one, Robert Greene another, Kalika Law and others are, it's part of the Cinereach partnership that we have with the Sundance Institute, the Art of Nonfiction Initiative, which is looking to create a space where artists who want to focus on that are being allowed to, because if these artists and these storytellers are being only held to the standard of the commercial accessibility of their work, we'll continue to keep making the same films without enough innovation. So that's within the American funding landscape, part of what we're trying to unlock and help the filmmakers unlock for themselves.
And that question of risk, because obviously in terms of the clip in that film being a departure, and I think I'd be really interested to hear what you feel, and you feel, Al, as well, about how taking risks with your platforms, how big a kind of part does that feature?
We programmed this before even knowing if we could really do it. We didn't. It's not like the BBC project when they handed out cameras and said to the refugees, "Okay, go onto the rubber boat and film yourself." We wanted to collect this material and assemble it, and just another remark: we are doing now a follow-up. And also the smartphone is in the center of the creative process. It's called The War on My Phone, and this is now reflecting, here I am as a refugee in a shelter in the German countryside, lost in the middle of nowhere, but every day the war is on my phone, because family, friends are sending videos from the hometown destroyed, from Syrian streets that are bombed. So they receive this footage every day. They are Skyping every day, and they are living these double realities, the war and German countryside, and that's what we are now doing as a follow-up to this project. It's also user-generated, and I hope it will be in Sheffield next year, perhaps.
I mean, I think anyone who gets involved in making a feature documentary is taking a risk. Like it's they're hard.
There are no safe choices.
And they're hard to make, and they're hard to get all the way through the process is tough and like But I think platforms. I think we're in a really exciting time. And I think there's loads of platforms and channels and who are taking huge risks in terms of what they're commissioning and what they're what they're broadcasting. It's hard. Like advice, I feel like I'm in a very kind of protected and kind of creative environment. Like we're able to take a lot of risks because we have our own channel, we have our own digital platforms. If someone in my department or in the office kind of comes to me with a great idea, it's really quick and easy to get that up and running and moving, and that I'm fully aware of how kind of privileged an environment that is. So I feel like I could sit here and say I take loads of risks, but I take loads of risks within a very kind of comfy space, And
obviously, the question of a theatrical release is a huge one. I mean, a big issue that we face here in the UK in terms of independent film and how hard, how possible it is even to get a film out, get people to see it, how important is that sitting at the heart of films for you? I mean, in particular, Hajnal.
It's not that important for us. For us, it's more the filmmaker's choice. Obviously, there is with theatrical. There's the cultural cachet that comes along with it. A lot of filmmakers want to do it because of the Oscar, not getting nominated for an Oscar. But for us, it's, the journey of the film and how it reaches audience. We want to be part of that, but we're not kind of dictating where the filmmaker wants to take it. And then I wanted to just make a comment about risk in that for us, because Sundance is all about the independent artist, so we do take risks, but it's really, we have to remember, and the way we think about it is that it's the artist that's taking a risk. It's the artist that's telling the story, that's taking a risk, that's kind of jumping off the edge and kind of taking a leap of faith to pursue this journey that they're on, and we're privileged to be part of that. Sorry, so that was like 2 questions in one, and I hope I answered both.
Good, yeah.
And for you, John, just in terms of that, the theatrical.
Yeah, Cinereach is a nonprofit foundation. Our goals are philanthropic. That's about as privileged and comfortable a position as you can be. Our job is to locate where risk lies for filmmakers and help insulate them from some, if it's a commercial pressure that's not going to let them make the film they want to make, maybe we can help there. Or maybe we can, provide support to private partners who are putting in equity and allow them more comfort along with the filmmaker to allow the film team to make the film that they really want to make without having to worry about what it'll mean for that bottom line. But again, I think Cinereach exists partly because there's not a state funding mechanism that's as robust as you see in other countries. And we're privileged to be a private foundation, so we can make a lot of those editorial decisions ourselves. But I think both of your notes about where the risk lives is correct. I think it lives with the filmmakers.
Well, very often the cinema release comes with a kind of co-productions I do. This means TV money plus film fund money. And then, of course, it's nice to have a premiere, to go to the festivals with the film before the broadcast. But the disadvantage that comes along with it is, of course, the holdback. When the film is in the cinemas, we cannot broadcast it. If it's funded by film fund money, then we have a holdback of 1.5 years. And this is when the film is sitting on my shelf and I can't do anything with it. So that's the flip side. Of course, we can shorten it, but it usually is 1 year of when I have to wait for the film. Everybody has talked about it, written about it, and then me programming it, here it is, and everybody saying, oh, that's really yesterday's stuff. So that's what I dislike about it, about the cinema release. But of course, the funds are really interesting. We have pretty powerful film fund institutions. So
I guess that's why it's interesting to think about. You're right. That central problem there for broadcasters, it does make that whole process quite difficult. And I think the sooner that we start to see that getting broken down and more kind of day and date release, and I think the better.
We are having a huge political discussion amongst producers and politicians and media people and TV people to sort of how can we deal it, because we are not cannibalizing each other. I think we have to create events that are sort of cinema, TV, and a huge create debates, in society about the stories we want to tell. But this is there's a strong lobby of the cinema owners, and so far they have managed to hinder a change in the regulation that is more coming together and doing one thing together, be it TV or cinema. The numbers of the people going to cinema for a documentary are not so important. It's not so important, so I don't think we cannot harmonize the interest there.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to another clip now, which is from Quest, which is a Cinereach project.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And you've already spoken a bit about, how the filmmaker sits at the heart of really everything that you do and the kind of decisions that you make. And could you just expand a bit more about, what your approach is to how you go and find that talent? What is it about your relationship with the filmmaker and your relationship with their voice that leads you to make films like this?
Yeah. It's a unique film that's really close to the heart of everyone at Cinereach. It was one that I first encountered at IFP's Film Week in New York about 2 years ago. And that's the subject of the film, Quest. It's a really understated clip. The film has, which is playing at Sheffield this year, it has moments of really extraordinary poignancy, but the filmmaker spends a lot of time in those kind of just daily life moments, allowing you to soak in sort of the richness and texture of this person's life and honoring who he was as a person. But when I first met John, he sat down at the table with Quest. It was the first pitch I'd ever had where the subject sat down with the filmmaker, and I thought, who are these people? And they had formed a bond. John had been basically living with Quest and his family nearby in the same neighborhood, sharing their lives together for about 8 years, and it was this huge work of love. And he had never made a feature film before. He didn't yet have a full-time editor or producer on the project. And so I say this sort of on the heels of our conversation about what makes a feature doc and what makes it cinematic and how we value it being able to play in the theaters is, he wasn't Laura Poitras. He was a really passionate filmmaker with a very singular vision, who had this passion project. It was a mountain of footage, of 8 years of footage, and he needed help just figuring out his next steps. So we began a conversation with him, and we engaged him first almost in a producerial role, and then provided him with grant support over the length of the production and post-production so that he could finish the film. But that's one whose lifespan is going to be very different than, a Blackfish, but no less successful. I think it's an example for me that every film needs its own unique standards of success, and that's sort of how I look at Quest and part of why it's so dear.
Hajnal, just in terms of how the Sundance, the Institute works and how the kind of support that you have for talent, but also the kind of relationship you have with filmmakers as it were, as artists. Could you just talk us through a little bit more about how that sits?
Of course. So essentially, once we grant a project or a filmmaker, the first thing we say to them is welcome to the family, because we really look at it's a community, and the doc community is fairly small, and it's a family, and we want to nurture their talent, and we're kind of in it for the long haul. We don't set deadlines. Like, we have some films that go on for 7 to 10 years before they're finished, and our grants are relatively small, and it is the artist support that we can kind of really get our hands on, and with the kind of the okay from the filmmaker, like they have to come out and ask for it. They have to say, we want your input. And then, we have labs in the summer. We have an edit lab, doc edit lab. We have sound design lab. We have a producing fellowship. We have a festival track where we bring filmmakers and their films, and we kind of help them network with industry. And then in addition to that, the Institute, we have our other departments. So we have a creative distribution wing. So if the filmmaker wants to kind of do DIY distribution, then we're their in-house kind of sales agents to kind of help them guide them through that. We have discounts with aggregators, and we have partnerships and connections that we can help them with. We also have we recently launched like a Catalyst initiative a couple years ago, which is more a lab for a creative investor, but it's where we bring projects, and we teach investors how they can put equity into films. So that's another opportunity we offer our filmmakers, and that also helps them because more and more equity is going into documentary. So it's educating both sides of the field in terms of like what is an appropriate relationship, what is an appropriate kind of how do you work together with the creative investor, and
how do they come to you? How do
they come to us? Yes. So they come to. We have an open call.
There must be no shortage of people coming to the Sundance Institute.
Right. So we actually have an open call. We have it's a rolling open call. We have an online application, In partnership with the IDA, we launched it's like a core common application that a number of funders are using, and it's, the same basic questions, which is aimed at simplifying filmmakers' lives, so you're not rewriting every single application. But you go online, you submit, we fund from development through post. We do have some impact grants as well, but those are for prior grantees. And if you have any questions, we're always here for you. Just email us. We have dfp@sundance.org. That comes to most of us or all of us in the documentary film program. And then the other way you come to us is, we meet you at festivals and markets, and that's how. But you always have to submit online.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's fair to say that kind of everyone here, and a huge majority of people at DocFest are keenly interested in new talent coming through, more emerging talent. Those voices coming through. From your point of view, Jutta, and also your point of view, Al, just in terms of how that instinct also sits against the kind of, here are the makers of Amy. What is it that kind of excites you, and how kind of how do you get that balance between those newer voices coming through and those people who are perhaps more established and feel, as it were, not more reliable, but you have a really clear sense of their kind of documentary kind of work and history leading up to new conversations around commissions. Do you want to just start that?
Yeah. Wait, so sorry, the question, how do I balance new emergent talent with kind of reliable talent? Or say,
more established. Let's say established. Because that doesn't mean they're reliable.
Well, I mean, I guess it's our remit, we're a youth media brand, right? Like my audience is young. I'm trying to reach a young audience all the time. That means that, there's very much that I'm also looking for young people to make all the programming that exists on our channels, and so I guess with that I'm looking at kind of first-time filmmakers or kind of emerging filmmakers all of the time, and that's a big part of what we do, and so I'm always excited by that, and actually I think we're fairly well balanced. The average age in our office is 24, but there's lots of people a lot older than that, obviously, myself included. And I think what we do is we balance kind of very, very young, enthusiastic, kind of emerging talent with kind of older heads who can help guide them through the processes and, legal and compliance and all the things that they may not have run into on the kind of scale of either kind of broadcast series or or feature documentaries, and so, but I mean that's 100% the case. I'm always looking for young emerging people, but I mean interestingly, it's like I'll work with anyone as well. I mean people, very very established people pitch us stuff as well, and that's exciting for its own reasons, and but I think when you're like Amy would have worked for Vice because I think our audience would have responded to that. But that's what I'm always thinking about is actually just the brief for me is always the youth audience. And so with that comes certain types of filmmakers, and certain types of ideas and approaches, So, yeah.
Well, as for the selection of the projects, I think it's a mixture of work experience. I think I'm doing my job for 17 years or something like that, and intuition. If I read an idea, do I want to see this? Is this now the project? I first have to have this kick. Let's. So once I read 5 lines and I said, yes, I have to do it. He didn't even propose it to me. The filmmaker, I read it in a publication of the Film Fund. And I said, let's do it, yes. Yeah, I called him up, I pursued him, I forced him to work with me. And in the end, it got a Lola, the German BAFTA. And,
it's true, it can happen.
It's rare.
No, this was, it was fantastic. But there are also projects with people you have never heard the name, and then you find, hey, what is this? two Spanish girl and boy, men and two filmmakers from Spain, having a very direct link to Baltasar Garzón, who is the head of the legal team defending Julian Assange. And they want to focus on the legal strategies. How will they try to get him out of the situation he's in? I said, wow, let's do it. I have never heard of these filmmakers, and it was a 5-year experience. It still isn't finished. The film we decided to finish because what is the end to it? It's called Hacking Justice, and they were young. I think it's really a thrilling piece on the whole debate you can have behind the WikiLeaks and his role he played, and U.S. elections and so on. Putin, everything is in it. So give the young people a chance also.
I think also like the you know, like how you kind of nurture young talent is different. Like I think there's, you know, and you guys sort of spoke about this a bit of kind of different ways of bringing young people into film, and you know, not kind of throwing people straight into the deep end. You know, like I think, you know, one of the things I think we do quite well is we've got strands, and you know, through the digital side, it's like if a filmmaker comes to me who I think is really exciting, I might not work with them straight away because I'm only working on kind of TV and features at the moment, but I might hand them to you know, someone who's commissioning sort of 15-minute pieces for us, or you know, and try and kind of nurture them through that and get a kind of, you know, more kind of breadth of experience before taking them and say, actually, no, why don't we do something that's 60 minutes long, or why don't we, you know, and having those opportunities is, like, you know, I think it's lucky for us, but those opportunities exist in lots of places.
Coming back to your keyword, the risk, taking risks. Of course, if people are not experienced, but they have a great idea, great access, great storytelling, then this is a risk, but you sort of try to give a good framework. If you have an experienced producer and very experienced editor, then this can actually really help to create something special.
Great, thank you. And we're just going to move on to our next clip now, which is from Unrest, which I believe is a Sundance supported project. Can I ask, just in terms of I suppose we're living in this, you know, well, I say we're living in, it's kind of constantly metamorphosing around us, but this kind of post-truth, post-fact world, or as it's called, and you know, how important is that to you in terms of how filmmakers approach, as it were, kind of their subjectivity versus a kind of balancing that with a more objective view in the work that they're making? Do you have a view, or does it guide your decision making? Al, can I ask you to first?
I mean, I think that documentary's job is to be subjective. You know, I think like when you know, none of us are making news, and I feel like, you know, our audiences come to us because they want us to have an opinion. I think documentary should have an opinion. And actually I get, like, you know, I find I get kind of bored of documentaries that are trying to be too balanced, if you know what I mean, or trying to hide a kind of editorial voice or perspective. But I mean, yeah, I don't think it's the whole, like, I mean, the whole kind of like, oh, we live in a post-truth world. I feel like documentary's in a very healthy place right now, and I think people, you know, audiences are excited to see kind of directors and stories that have a really strong point of view. And I think as long as you're open about what your bias is, or you're open about you know, your kind of standpoint, I think that's mostly exciting for audiences.
And do you find with Vice that that's, in a way, that's part of what the audience goes to you for, is that strength of subjectivity of...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just something we've never hid, if you know what I mean. Like I guess it's like also, you know, tons of, for years everything we made was like fronted by, you know, a young journalist at the centre of the film, who was very much kind of all sort of first person reporting and, you know, talking about kind of what's in front of them. And as our kind of the form of what we made kind of widened, and maybe that didn't involve having kind of people at the center, I still feel like our films had kind of a real point of view, and I think, you know, that's sort of, you know, you look at kind of YouTube comments and we're either told that we're like the kind of communist liberal left, or we're, you know, or we're like, I mean, we're everything apparently, but I think at least it's like people are looking at us and saying like, oh look, like Vice have, you know, a point and an agenda and like something that, you know, and for me what that is that all we're trying to just explain kind of the world around us, and yeah, I mean, I think that you need lots of that.
And Hajnal, can I just ask, just in terms of your approach, because I think you have obviously some slightly different kind of, not pressures as it were, but concerns just in terms of your stakeholders and you know, how you're investing, using that money to support people, and is this something that really resonates with you?
I think, you know, what's really important is that the film is factually accurate. I think that's what we're looking for, and you know, we're not necessarily needing something that's like journalistic or whatnot, but it has to be fair. And I think, you know, the filmmaker is kind of is entering into a sort of contract with the audience, and when they do that, you have to be honest with what kind of journey that you're going to be taking them on. So you have to kind of tell the audience up front. So as long as you're factually accurate, if you're fair with the audience, if you're doing a journalistic story, make sure that it is journalistically, you know, like,
like
sure. You just need to follow through on what you're setting out to do. Yeah, do the homework and follow through on what you're setting out to do. You know, obviously there are some films that we do have different pots of money the way we fund. So some films that we fund are social issues, some are more journalistic, but we do have a mix, especially with our ability with the Cinereach partnership. So, but fairness is key and factually accurate, and be honest with the audience on what you set out to do.
And John, in a way, you have sort of different stakeholders as well, don't you, in terms of Cinereach? And so again, is that something that really resonates with you? Do you have to kind of modulate how you talk with certain filmmakers?
Yeah, I don't think we would be able to, you know, fact check effectively, even if we could. I think it's important for us not to conflate factual truthfulness with truth, with honesty, as you said. I think we're bombarded with so much information that, and as Al said, you know, there should be an expectation of interpretation anytime anyone's telling you a story in any medium. And for us, it's really important that the filmmaker have self-awareness about what she or he is setting out to say and make and do, but in a post-truth environment, which I never thought I would say publicly, it's not realistic to ask people to have a shared understanding of what even the facts are, right? Yeah. It is much more realistic and much more productive to say, what are our values? What do we value? Who are we? What are we trying to do here? And if you can establish that, those shared values, that would be the end point for Cinereach, the entry point on which we would engage a filmmaker, engage a project, and have trust and confidence in what the endeavor is, you know.
Right, thank you. And just as a broadcaster, do you have a different set of kind of pressures?
Well, since we're talking creative documentaries, we're talking storytelling, and storytelling means narration, and if there's a narrator, it's absolutely comes within itself that it's subjective. Someone telling his own view on things, his own perspective, and that's what makes it interesting, that allows us to share in and to have a shared experience. And I think you have to be genuine, you have, as my colleagues here said, you have to be honest and not have a hidden or an obvious agenda. Obvious would be blunt, it would be like an activist film that then we are talking rather as an artistic form of expression, creative form of reflecting on your perspective, on your vision of reality. And so when we are talking facts, and then that's really hardcore journalism. That's something else. Of course, you check your facts, but when we're talking about a creative act, it's your own truth, or you might not have the answers, but you're searching for the answers. And once you let other people accompany you in this quest, then that's a shared experience, and we are beyond this, is this true or not true? It's your personal truth you're telling.
Does anybody have really any strong feelings about, this, the notion that maybe sort of feature docs, in terms of form and style, of borrowing from fictions and vice versa, and do you feel is there a line that gets crossed, or is that just about the approach that the filmmaker takes, and so long as they're doing that, consistently, then are the ways that they tell the story, does it really have to matter?
An ethical line or a factual line, like a?
I'm thinking more in terms of stylistic. Yeah. In terms of the techniques that you use to, I guess, to elicit a response to whether that's an emotional response or a kind of a political response, or to manipulate the audiences, or to create tension even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's happening all the time. I often feel like that. The documentary is borrowing more and more techniques from drama, and actually drama is borrowing more and more techniques from documentary. And I think a lot of successful dramas recently have had a very kind of heightened sense of reality within them, and I think it's interesting to see a kind of convergence there. And I guess even going all the way back to that kind of thing of like cinema documentaries, I think you're starting to see a lot of reconstruction in documentaries. You're starting to see the kind of shooting style of lots of documentaries kind of lean in a direction where they're kind of borrowing more and more from drama, and I think that probably is an element of kind of wanting to appeal to kind of popular cinema going audiences, as well as just using a form that because kind of technology is getting cheaper, cameras are getting cheaper, everything, it means that form is there suddenly more available. But yeah, I think there's definitely a kind of a convergence happening there at the moment. Maybe that will rupture right open again.
Definitely. I think etiquettes, categories, and structuring the forms that's not very helpful. It's putting you into a very narrow-minded setup, and the thing is, there are different forms of expression, and you can be playful about it. No dogmatism, that's not helpful neither, and just have your own way of telling your story. That's what we want. And then it can be animation, and then it can be found footage, and it can be your own diary excerpts or whatever that you put with it.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're just going to go to one final clip, and then I think we'll open it out to the audience if we can. Thank you.
That's a rant. Yeah, I mean that clip came from that's a film that's actually in the edit at the moment about knife crime in London, and particularly about kind of the stabbings of young black men in London, and the guy who's kind of, it's sort of his story who's in the film. Josh was an ex-gang member who kind of led a gang in London sort of 10 years ago, and now is kind of sort of got his life together. He's been in prison twice and is trying to sort of trace the steps of like what's the legacy of what he did, and he doesn't feel good about it, that's for sure. But I think this is a film we've been making for the last couple of years, and now is finally in the edit. But yeah, that clip's a bit maybe dark for a Sunday morning. There'll be some happy bits.
So I think we have some people with mics on the side, is that right? So yeah, one on each aisle. So if there's anybody from the audience would like to ask a question, and I'll try and see you. One here?
Wait, do we need the light? I think we could do a bit of light on the audience.
So I can't quite see.
Hello, my name's Alice. I just want to find out, could you each talk about a particular project which was very close to your heart, and can you say why?
Me? I probably one of the films that we made quite recently at the UK office, a film called Chemsex, which is about sexualized drug use amongst the gay community in the UK, and we actually had that as a work in progress here at one point. That was a film that started as it was an article that was written for Vice, and then it became, we were going to make a short film, then we were going to make a longer film, then it turned into a feature documentary, and I'm super proud of that film. I love that. That's one.
I guess for me, Unrest, the clip that you guys saw, that was a film that, so the filmmaker came to us, she wasn't a filmmaker, she was just kind of documenting her journey with chronic fatigue syndrome, and we really went on this filmmaking journey with her from very early on through the end, and it was just beautiful to see her blossom as a filmmaker and to see the film kind of come together, and it's just such a powerful, emotionally powerful film.
Yeah. For me, I think Quest has that special place in my heart, partly because did I go silent? All right. From a funder's perspective, I'm not someone who's made a lot of films myself, right? When I'm looking at a filmmaker standing next to a pile of footage, I don't know the film will one day exist. But that's sort of like the belief in the thing not there, and making that leap with someone, and finding that it's there was a really extraordinary thing for me personally, but also just becoming a part of, not him as much of a part of our team, but like feeling like we were becoming a part of theirs, of his. That was really special.
Perhaps one we just finished. It's called Warriors of Faith, and it's about a group of young Muslims in Germany that are doing all kind of street events, let's say it, like decapitations, but it's their way of protesting against ISIS violence and terror attacks, and they say we have to take a stand as Muslims, not in our name. We just finished it, and it will be broadcast in July on first channel in Germany. And for me, it's the film of the moment. These people are extremely courageous. They get death threats every day. They are a very small group, but they stand up, and their courage is incredible to do this. I think this might have an impact and drive more people, more from the Muslim community that is extremely silent, and to take a stand and start really protesting against what's happening. So for me, it's this importance at the moment, the relevance of the film. That is close to my heart.
And there was a question just here, I think. Do keep putting your hands up and I'll try and spot you so that we can...
Thanks. I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about specific examples, because obviously documentary is very subjective, and I found watching your clips quite insightful. So I have a kind of similar question. What's a film that you've seen at Sheffield where you thought, oh yes, if that had been pitched to me, I would have gone for it? A film that works for you and your audience, one that you actually haven't been involved in?
This is where I'm going to be like, everything I've seen so far. Thing is, I mostly go and see, there's films I've seen that I've really enjoyed. That rap film last night was amazing. Would that have been right for us? I don't know. Maybe. I think it could have worked for Vice. Yeah, maybe I'll go with that. Whitney wouldn't have worked for us. Yeah.
I haven't actually seen any films here yet.
You're asking for people who come to Sheffield and take meetings the entire time.
But I think...
Yes.
But I think, just one film that from kind of the past that I wish we would have been involved with would have been Cutie and the Boxer.
Yeah. This is a film that I just saw at Sheffield this year. We did support it, but it wasn't pitched to me, so it kind of counts. It was The Cage Fighter, and that was I was blown away by it. I was one of the few people at Cinereach who didn't get to review it, meet with the filmmaker, see any footage. So I went in almost totally blind, and I just thought, what extraordinarily cinematic, dramatic filmmaking. Talk about fiction filmmaking informing nonfiction form. It was really, could have been scripted. Yeah.
What I saw only extracts at the documentary campus, but I felt drawn to it. This was Thank You for the Rain on climate change, and also Trophy about big animal hunting, the big five hunting that was very, very expressive. And but there are certainly many more, only we have so many meetings.
Great. Thank you. And a question just here, I think.
Hello. I'm an agent for editors, and I know there's so many ways of telling a story. And I was just wondering, obviously watching it at Broomfield last night, there's presenter-led feature-length docs, and then there's somebody else that's telling their own story. I just wondered what your preference is or what your thoughts on that was.
Wait, between presenter-led documentary and contributor-led? Wait, sorry, can I? Was that the question?
Someone telling their own story.
Or like observational?
Yeah.
Fine. I don't know. No preference for me, either way. But it, it's the film has to be great. I guess it's like that's to the point of when we were talking about form earlier. Like, form doesn't. It shouldn't be the thing that you first of all judge. It's like it's how great is that story.
Yeah, I have to agree. Doesn't really matter. I think what's more important is the idea of the cultural tapestry that all these films kind of feed into.
Yeah. I don't think it would count for or against our review of a project in terms of our criteria or something like that, but if you are going to put yourself in a film, I do think that's going to be a challenging thing if you've never looked at yourself as a subject before, you're going to have to make editorial decisions. It may involve cutting yourself out of certain parts of the film, right? But that was such a smart thing to say. It carries implications with it, but it wouldn't carry an implication on whether or not we, approve support of the project.
Well, same here. I mean, there are some projects that cannot exist without a first-person narration. For example, a filmmaker's sister was a Red Army terrorist, and she tells the story of how did this affect her whole family and kind of traumatize the family. And of course, she had to tell her own story and the story of her family. So, but it's not a criteria for yes or no selection.
And a question down here.
Yeah, hi. I'm a producer based in Spain. Just very pragmatic question, because we know how to reach out to Sundance and Cinereach, and I know how to find Jutta. Maybe it's interesting for the audience, but how can we, what's the best way to contact you, Al?
Me?
Yes.
My ears hurt for this thing. You can email
He's
me.
undercover.
You can email me on al.brown@vice.com. That would be the easiest.
Yeah, but it's good to have a personal
Yeah, I mean,
also.
maybe we seem like a bit of a closed shop from the outside. For years, all our email addresses were in the magazine, but then if you're not like a teenager or a skateboarder, you're probably not seeing that very often. Yeah, meeting me at things like this and emailing me, and we've got quite a small commissioning and kind of development team, and I feel like we're fairly accessible, but probably within a kind of small kind of group. I mean, or kind of a small UK industry. So send me an email.
And you're getting back to it?
Okay.
Eventually.
Okay, cool.
See, there's a question just at the back there, and then one down. Should we take this one here first, if we could? Yes. And then there's one just at the back.
Given the fact that there's so many ways you can edit a documentary, and often the documentary story is found during the process, I just wondered about how you wanted to be pitched, because obviously we can have a very specific idea, but it can go very left or right depending on the process. I wondered if you could all maybe answer how you prefer to be pitched, or you're happy to have I have an idea about X, or how much of a treatment do you like, or does it not matter?
I feel like I'm going first every time. I like. So can you hear me still? I keep breaking my microphone. I like to be involved quite early on if possible. That's not always the case. I mean, sometimes we'll come on as kind of like completion funding or stuff, towards the end of projects. But I don't need like huge treatments. It's like if tape exists, amazing. That's great. I'd love to see something. But I can, for kind of when it's about kind of working out whether I think something's going to work kind of somewhere within the kind of Vice ecosystem, I feel like I can work that out pretty quickly from kind of, even sort of top line idea, a paragraph, and then we just start the conversation. It's like if that idea kind of grabs my interest, then it normally just becomes a longer conversation that can go over a period of time. But yeah, I don't need like huge polished treatments and edits, and I feel like most of us, if you're kind of sitting here doing the sort of jobs that we're doing, you should have an instinct for it and be able to kind of see pretty quickly. I'm trying to find my microphone.
I guess I kind of touched upon this earlier. We do have a formal application process that kind of spells out what we need in terms of treatment, story synopsis, marketing strategy, distribution strategy. We need a budget from development through post. We need visual material. We fund as I said, we fund at all stages of production, but we don't require footage for development applications. However, to be competitive, I would say have some footage, because we get anywhere from 20 to 30 projects a week, and we fund probably about 4% of the projects, and it just helps a lot to have a visual sample.
I was comparing your volume and approval rate to ours. I was like, wow, it's good volume. I think the most effective pitches are ones in which the filmmaker is able to speak authentically in his or her own language about the project. I need to know who you are, what your voice is, what you're trying to accomplish, and if there's a chance that the project could be a fit for Cinereach, it's my job as much as anyone else's to do the legwork of sort of understanding your project through the lens of Cinereach. We have something very similar to the common application. It's actually a little lighter. A lot of the questions are optional. We just want the basic information about a project before we sort of launch into a larger conversation about finances and budgets and logistics and so forth.
Well, no standards, no standardized application, just mail.
Oh, thank you.
Your microphone. There we go, you're back.
We try to look at everything and get back.
Right, thank you. I know there was a question, but unfortunately we've entirely run out of time now, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap it up, and I'd just like to say thank you very much to the 4 panellists for being here and for the questions that you've asked them.
Thank you.
Thank you.